What actor playing a supporting role outshone the star of the movie so much they had to make a major change?
For all intents and purposes, Elizabeth Swann, Keira Knightley, is the protagonist of The Curse of the Black Pearl. It is her journey that we track throughout the film. And by that hypothesis, Will Turner, Orlando Bloom, is the secondary protagonist since his character arc is intrinsically bound to that of Elizabeth's. But all those words are meaningless. Elizabeth, Will, Captain Barbossa and the motley crew of colorful characters must stand aside. Because at precisely 9 minutes and 2 seconds into the movie, a certain Captain Jack Sparrow, Johnny Depp, saunters into the screen, perched regally over a submerging dinghy, and the film isn't the same. He is the crown jewel, the piece de resistance, the showpiece, the N plus ultra, take your pick. 17 years later, the name Jack Sparrow is synonymous with Johnny Depp. It's jarring then to contemplate that they initially wrote the part for Hugh Jackman, hence the Jack. The screenwriters originally envisaged Sparrow as a supporting character, he was almost an afterthought. The first film was a movie, and then Jack was put into it, almost. He doesn't have the obligations of the plot in the same ways that the other characters have. He meanders his way through, and he kind of affects everybody else. Gore Verbinski, director. But Depp took the unbridled essence of Sparrow and ran with it. He surprised everyone at the table red with his off-kilter take on the character. He plated his teeth gold and decided that the closest proxy for an 18th century pirate was Rolling Stones guitarist and friend, Keith Richards. His approach wasn't to everyone's liking. Depp's performance initially confused Disney executives, who questioned whether the character was drunk or gay. While watching The Rushes, Disney CEO Michael Eisner proclaimed Depp was ruining the film. Suffice to say, Depp did nothing of the sort. Quite the contrary, in fact. Jack Sparrow was the breakout character. He was the film's horizon. Savvy? Depp created something singular. It is a work of unadulterated brilliance. Make no mistake, Jack Sparrow is an inspired creation. That Academy Award nomination was thoroughly justified. His performance in The Curse of the Black Pearl, all buckle and swash, changed everything. It turned Depp from a somewhat nebbish character actor to a card-carrying leading man. And it made Jack Sparrow the undisputed lead of the Pirates franchise going forward. Elizabeth and Will departed with 2007's At World's End. Captain Jack kept at it, raiding, pillaging, plundering and otherwise pilfering his weaselly black guts out for another 10 years. And me hearties, that's got to be the best pirate I've ever seen. When Family Ties was pitched in the early 1980s, it was pitched as a show focused on a liberal, hippie couple with materialistic and politically conservative children. A then unknown actor showed up to audition for the uptight oldest son, but was quickly turned down. His take on the oldest child seemed too flippant, too cocky. However, the young actor's talent agent was insistent, so executive producer Brandon Tartikoff reluctantly agreed to let him to come back and audition again. This time his portrayal was more toned down, but the producer still didn't think the actor was right for the part. After going through the rest of his options and several more heated discussions with the actor's talent agent, who was still insistent that the actor was perfect for the role, the big shot finally relented. "Okay," he said. "But you'll never see his face on a lunchbox lid." With that, 21-year-old Michael J. Fox was cast as the ultra-conservative 16-year-old Alex P. Keaton. As it happened, the first episode revolved around a plot that involved his character. The producers were shocked about their audience's immediate positive reaction. By the fourth episode it was official, the focus of the show shifted, and it launched Michael J. Fox's career as a global superstar. After the debut of Back to the Future, Michael J. Fox did end up on the front of a lunchbox, which he had sent to the executive producer of Family Ties, with a special note. "Brandon, they wanted me to put a crow in here, but, love and kisses, Michael J." Matthew McConaughey was a 23-year-old unknown when he was cast as David Wooderson, the older guy who still hangs out with high school kids and picks up teenage girls, in Richard Linklater's cult 70s nostalgia hit Dazed and Confused. The role of Wooderson was supposed to be a bit part, while the role of hippie stoner Kevin Pickford, played by Shawn Andrews, was supposed to be quite prominent. But a combination of factors caused Linklater to minimize the role of Pickford and expand that of Wooderson. Andrews, it seemed, had behavioral issues and couldn't get along with just about anyone in the film's ensemble cast. Pickford was supposed to be the best friend of lead character Randy "Pink" Floyd, played by Jason London, but London, like everyone else, couldn't stand Andrews, and Linklater at one point needed to break up an actual fistfight between the two on set. If you watch the film, you'll notice that even in scenes in which they appear together, they barely speak to one another. McConaughey, meanwhile, was highly entertaining and charming in his delivery of the few lines Wooderson originally had, and as a bonus, got along swimmingly with the entire cast. So Linklater wrote more dialogue for the character on the spot, and had McConaughey improvise in other scenes, in order to give him more screen time and make Wooderson a bigger character, while Andrews' screen time was cut, as was that of Milla Jovovich, who played Pickford's girlfriend Michelle, simply because all of her scenes were shared with him. So Matthew McConaughey basically Matthew McConaughey'd his way to a bigger role. It was the performance that first gained him wide notice, and it gifted the world Wooderson's trademark drawled catchphrase, "All right, all right, all right." This is a reprint of my answer to a previous question: when did a background actor steal the show from a main character? My answer remains the same. My vote goes to The Pink Panther, 1963, directed by Blake Edwards. The movie's top star was the legendary David Niven, who played Sir Charles Lytton, the glamorous and sophisticated jewel thief who stole the Pink Panther diamond. Mr. Niven signed on to give his stalling career a jump-start, hoping to turn the movie into a vehicle for a series of sequels akin to the famous Thin Man movies. Dashing, handsome, rising young Hollywood star Robert Wagner also anticipated the movie being a vehicle for him to go on to bigger and better things, as well. Peter Ustinov was tabbed to play Inspector Clouseau, and he was cast to play it straight off Niven and Wagner's clever, charming, witty hijinks. So what happened? Peter Sellers happened. Ava Gardner was originally supposed to play the female lead, Madame Simone Clouseau, who also happened to be Sir Charles's secret accomplice, spoiler alert, but her behavior was considered too erratic by that time for the studio to give the go-ahead. French movie actress Capucine was asked to take over the role, with 2 weeks to go before production began. Mr. Ustinov's wife thought the switch in casting wouldn't work and she advised her husband to bow out, which he did. Blake Edwards had to find another Clouseau, and fast, and a relatively unknown Peter Sellers stepped forward. And movie history was made. Although Mr. Niven was understandably disappointed his star vehicle launched another star's career, it didn't stop him from working alongside Mr. Sellers in A Murder by Death, in 1976. Ironically, after Mr. Ustinov bowed out of The Pink Panther, he quickly found work in the movie Top Copy, 1964, replacing another actor who had to bow out at the last minute because of scheduling conflicts, a fellow named Peter Sellers. Mr. Ustinov won an Oscar for his performance. Mr. Sellers reprised the role for 4 sequels. Eventually other actors took on the character of Inspector Jacques Clouseau and a total of 11 movies were made, including portrayals by Roberto Benigni, Alan Arkin, and Steve Martin. None of these portrayals came close to Sellers' brilliance. I can't believe no one has mentioned these 4 actors. Leighton Meester in Gossip Girl. Her role was supposed to be a supporting role as Blair Waldorf and best friend of the main character, Serena, played by Blake Lively. Leighton did it so well and outshone Blake. She wasn't supposed to be in every episode, but by the 2nd season she was a regular, and the 3rd season, she was in each episode more than Blake. By the end of the show, her storyline had become more important than Blake's. Ed Westwick in Gossip Girl. He was supposed to also play Chuck Bass, a supporting character, as the bad rich kid from Manhattan and best friend to one of the 3 main characters who were supposed to lead the show in a love triangle. His line, "I'm Chuck Bass," whenever he was asked for a reason why he should deserve a certain thing, went from annoying to hilarious and eventually adorable. The more people got to know him, the more they reflected with him. His father was a man who didn't care about him emotionally and thought providing him with huge chunks of wealth was enough for Chuck. In reality, he was an empty soul who had simply put up borders to protect himself. He ended up being the major male character of the show. Ian Somerhalder in The Vampire Diaries. He was supposed to play the role of the bad brother, Damon Salvatore, to the main character, Stephanie. But by the time the show ended, he was the main character. This is because his romance, which was intended to be a small fling in the show, with his brother's girlfriend, Elena, had more chemistry and was more interesting. Eventually, his brother turned into an outsider. Joseph Morgan in The Vampire Diaries. He was supposed to be the villain for only 2 of the show's 8 seasons. He was so good that they tried to keep him into the show a little bit longer by expanding his storyline. But it seemed he was outshining the entire cast of The Vampire Diaries. Eventually, a spin-off called The Originals was made for him. The spin-off outshone The Vampire Diaries. Except for Peter Sellers and the Pink Panther, the most famous person who stole the show was Audrey Hepburn, in her ingenue role in Roman Holiday. There's an interview with Gregory Peck in which he tells the producer that if they don't put Audrey's name above the title, they're going to be humiliated at Academy Awards time. I don't seem to have it as a single clip, only as part of a longer interview. The supporting actor who so outshone her lead that they should have changed the movie but didn't was Marissa Tomei in My Cousin Vinny. It really should have been billed as My Cousin Vinny's Girlfriend. Of all of the dumb girlfriend roles played by Judy Holliday and her ilk, I've never seen anyone play a role so over the top and so believably at the same time. But maybe you have to have been to Brooklyn's Little Italy to know how believable it was. I'm not sure whether Katharine Hepburn was ever expected to be less than the focal point of Guess Who's Coming to Dinner, but her role certainly equals the sum of all the other parts. In the single line, "It's not that I don't want to know you, Hillary, although I don't, it's just that I'm afraid that we're not really the sort of people that you can afford to be associated with," she outacted the entire cast in 1 minute. Meryl Streep's breakout role in Kramer v. Kramer presaged her brilliance so much that they made a major change in the film while it was still in production. Streep felt that her courtroom testimony could only be heartfelt if it were actually heartfelt, and convinced them to shoot the scene with no script. Her spontaneous brilliance earned her her first much-deserved Academy Award. Yet, even as I write this, IMDb bills this as a movie about Dustin Hoffman. Jane Fonda so stole the film Clute that many people don't realize that the role of Clute was Donald Sutherland's, not hers. Although it was her previous film, They Shoot Horses, Don't They?, that was her first heavy-duty role. Clute was big box office and Academy Award, even though she was enormously unpopular in and out of Hollywood because of her politics. Clute was the beginning of a decade of acting brilliance often forgotten behind silly jokes about Ted Turner and aerobics tapes. Wow, has it been so long that nobody remembers this one show, Happy Days? The character of Arthur Fonzarelli, the Fonz, played by Henry Winkler, was a secondary character during the first season of Happy Days and was not even recognized in the opening credits. The popularity of the Fonz skyrocketed, and by the second season Henry Winkler moved to the opening credits. The popularity of the character continued to grow to the point where the show's producers seriously considered a name change from Happy Days to Fonzie's Happy Days. The producers dropped the idea after a conversation with the current star of the show, Ron Howard, yes, Ron Howard, the famous director. Eventually, after Ron Howard departed from the show, Henry Winkler was moved to the top billing of the show and most episodes revolved around him. The show lasted for 11 years on television. Interesting fact. The term, "jump the shark," signaling the point where a successful television show began its decline to cancellation, originated on Happy Days. The episode in question is where Fonzie jumped a shark on water skis. So in that particular episode, not only did Fonzie jump a shark, but the series did as well. The man, the myth, the legend. Heath Ledger. According to Nolan, Ledger improvised many of his scripts in The Dark Knight, 2008, and naturally guided the movie to where it needed to be. Everyone else on set was sort of in the palm of Ledger's hand as he carried the movie. His performance was jaw-dropping to many and people can't get their minds off of him, even after the credits roll. Here are some of Christopher Nolan's thoughts on Ledger as the Joker. He would sort of give me hints about what he was going to do. We would talk about it a bit. And I would try and be an audience for him and sort of engage with him, what he was doing. But a lot of it was about unpredictability, and I think he wanted to play his cards close to the chest. He would very gradually reveal to me the voice and the way he was going to do things, but not in one go, like, here's the Joker. We watched him sort of develop it, with the wardrobe and the makeup, and I kind of got to be a part of that creative process, which was great fun, but on set, there were always moments like that clapping or things he would do with his voice. His voice was so unpredictable. He created this bizarre pitch. I've seen a lot of people try and imitate it since. But we never quite knew if he was going to go high or if he was going to go low. You never knew what that guy was going to do, and that's what was terrifying about him. Christopher Nolan, BBC Radio 1. All in all, anyone who watched this movie can't deny that Ledger's performance exceeded every expectation for what an evil villain is. And how relatable they are to the real world.
Please leave your story in the comments. I would love to make a video on them in the future also. Don't forget to like and subscribe to you never miss a video.